Go ahead and start if it's okay. Um, Actually, this is just a real treat for me. As many of you know, I see a lot of familiar faces here. My name's Clive Kennedy, and I am a professor at the Clinical Forensic Psychology Department at the Chicago School in Los Angeles. Um, and we're going to be discussing for the next hour our experiences of presenting mental health services within a school setting. And it'll be done regarding as was mentioned earlier, the South Central Training Consortium. And it's been almost 30 years that Dr. Brinkley Kennedy supervised her first class at South Central Training Consortium. And each year since then, we've taken on varying numbers of MFT trainees and associates, psychology practicum students, pre-doctoral, postdoctoral interns. And at each level, our training model of learning to serve while serving to learn has been a successful win-win ingredient that has done a couple of things: expanding mental health services throughout LA County, in some communities that would not otherwise have services, while also strengthening opportunities for graduate psychology students to practice within urban communities while being supervised by psychologists and other mental health practitioners of color. This year we had a strong class of approximately 40 students who were placed in two different homeless residential care facilities, a sexual assault crisis facility, a domestic violence trauma shelter, a parole reentry residential therapeutic community, and 6 different charter schools. And so we're going to talk a little bit more about the Inner City Educational Foundation, or ICEF, in a few minutes. But to start off, I'd like to just introduce the panel. I'm going to start with Dr. Raven Rossetti.
Good afternoon, everyone. Can you hear me? Okay. I'm Dr. Raven Rossetti. I'm a 24-year Air Force vet, 11-year midlife mom, and a lifelong fitness enthusiast, and today a published author. For the last 2 years, I've been completing my postdoc experience as a psychological assistant at SCTC. Those 2 years have impacted and transformed my life both personally and professionally. Dr. BK and Dr. Kennedy entrusted me to represent the agency inside and outside the community, to lead the interns and conduct and organize training. The supervision was invaluable and rich. It was not just client-based, but it was also a lifelong lesson. They taught me the importance of transparency and flexibility. They also gave me the opportunity to serve and connect with the community that looks like me, which was so important. But most importantly, SCTC was more than my postdoc commitment. They're like my family. They always provided a safe space to be vulnerable and to show up and be my whole self. And I think that vulnerability just allows us to cultivate our growth and transformation. So that's why I'm an advocate for SCTC. Thank you.
And next, can you introduce yourself?
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Dana Langston. I am a graduate student at the Chicago School of Professional Psychology, earning my doctoral degree in clinical psychology. I am also a huge proponent of having faith in God. I have 2 children, and I too am so enriched and blessed by my experience that I've had at South Central Training Consortium. It's just been an invaluable year that I've had, and I recommend it to any student who wants to learn not only about themselves, but about how they can serve their community. And I'll turn it over to our next presenter.
Mr. Kenneth, how about you?
Good afternoon. My name is Kenneth Brown, and I too am a second-year graduate student at Pacific Oaks College in Pasadena, where I'm earning my graduate degree in marriage and family therapy with an emphasis in African American family studies. So excited to have an opportunity to be a part of South Central Training Consortium. I am a native of Los Angeles, born and raised here in Los Angeles, part of the community. And oftentimes I'm looking to intersect my love for theory and my love for therapy with my other passions. I graduated from Second City Hollywood with a specialization in improv comedy and sketch writing. And I'm always looking to see that intersectionality between the arts and with therapy. So thank you, and I'm so happy to be here.
Thank you, Kenneth. And Ms. Urennaya.
Hi, thank you so much everyone for having me today. My name is Urennaya Okoro, and I'm a fourth-year PsyD student at Alliant International University with an emphasis in multicultural community clinical psychology. I also have a master's in clinical psychology with an emphasis in marriage and family therapy. So I got you guys both on the community and the family front. While my degrees are in psychology, I do also have some background in education. So I've worked as a substitute teacher for a number of years, as well as an intervention specialist in special education. I'm a native Californian and my family is from Nigeria, but I've been across the US for some academic programs in schools. This year I served LA Community and ISF Innovation Elementary School. Thank you so much for having me.
All right, and Miss Andrea.
Good afternoon, and it is such a pleasure to be here serving on this panel. I'm Andrea again. I have my degree in, I am an associate marriage family therapist intern. I grew up in South Central Los Angeles in the 60s. The communities are quite different today than they were then. The schools that I attended was 68th Street School, Bethune Junior High School, and Fremont High. But I decided I would graduate from Los Angeles High School. I am a graduate of Pacific Oaks College. I have over 25 years of service working with the underserved community, which is Black and Brown. I began to look at education quite, I guess, with a fine-tooth comb in comparison to the education that I received. So that's what kept me working with children. The things that I got out of being a part of South Central Training Consortium has been rich. I have had the opportunity to be enlightened. My scope has been broadened. I have had many experiences on a level of diversity and a space to grow and develop myself. I have had and received great leadership from Dr. Kennedy, both Rhonda, Dr. Kennedy, and Clive Kennedy. And I'll pass it back to you.
Okay. You know, you can see we had a real varied group of practicums and interns and postdocs, also the MFT trainees, LPCC associates. And so we were able to introduce these varying clinicians to different segments of the community to help them become a little bit more familiar with the language of therapy and what that entails. This was especially significant this year. I mean, 2020 is really a serious year. You know, with not only the pandemic, we've had a lot of grief and loss. We had didactic training on grief and loss anyway, but this year was very significant with deaths of, for example, Kobe Bryant, Nipsey Hussle, whose agency was right across the street from the school. And so I wanted to familiarize you with the school a little bit for those of you who may not be familiar. And so I'm going to actually play a little piece of that LA Times video so that you can get a chance to really get a feel for what we have experienced here. Let me actually pull that. Excuse me.
Dr. Kennedy, there's no sound.
Got it.
I don't know if it's because you have your headphones in.
Yeah. Thank you.
It was like a playful thing at first, and then I realized that I love doing what I do. It's just something that helps me express myself. I just pick up a pen and paper and let out my feelings. But Nipsey Hussle was more than just a rapper. He was a community activist. He's not the type of celebrity to just leave where he came from. He never left. You can see him every day. Like, my school is right across the street from his store, so he was just always around, and I really respected that. Everybody that's from here, they love Nipsey. You cannot love him. I mean, his face is everywhere. His songs are everywhere. You can't walk down the street and not see Nipsey or hear a Nipsey song. He's just everywhere. After he passed away, it made me really realize that life is not promised. He meant a lot to a lot of people, and how he passed away, it just made it seem like he meant nothing. I just really respected him. He was an inspirational person, somebody just to look up to. Blowing, they throw dirt on our skin. They shouted to have us live in like they ain't know that the problem was within. Nipsey Hussle made me proud. So call myself black and me. Y'all come and take us like they got to. The doc check.
Okay, so you can get a chance, a flavor for what the school is. We provided services from second grade up to high school, and we presented psychoeducational platforms during this process as well. And so I'd like to turn it over to Dr. Rossetti to talk a little bit about the different ETM and second step.
Thank you, Dr. Kennedy. In 2018 through the 19 school year, I had the pleasure of launching the Embrace the Mind, which we call ETM, the Mental Wellness Psychoeducation Initiative. It was developed by Tatiana Woolridge. She was a MPH candidate at Harvard University. She created the ETM initiative to educate Black and Brown communities and to debunk the stigmas regarding mental health. The first year that we had ETM, it combined classroom and computer-based instruction. The lessons incorporated one of three interrelated components of mental health: how one understands and feels about the self, stress, and society. The curriculum introduced mental health and wellness, mindfulness, meditation, social influence, compassion, contributing to the community, spreading positivity, resilience, challenging stress responses, coping with stress, and we introduced alcohol and prescription drug use. During the course of the year, we also found that the students benefited more by merging a less demanding medical-based model to a psychosocial interactive experience in which we could kind of teach the educational components of mental health and then have the students volunteer their personal narratives so they could connect with what we taught with their lived experience. At the end of the school year, we provided feedback regarding, the modifications and the student responses, which led to the 2019 and 2020 modified ETM curriculum, which was implemented throughout now 7 ISEF school districts. The computer-based component was extracted and more interactive lessons were incorporated. Although the modifications were made, we found that some of the students were not actively engaged with the academic content. So we incorporated multimedia components such as like celebrity video testimonies, highlighting mental health and mindfulness. And we also developed some imagery storyboards. We found that it provided a visceral connection where they can address more in-depth conversations and kind of worked along the lines if they needed more support as far as our mental health services. This curriculum worked for middle school and high school, but we still needed to find an avenue to reach the elementary school. Ms. Urennaya and Mr. Ken will explain more about that process.
Thank you, Dr. Rossetti. So Embrace the Mind really is a special program. It helped us teach our scholars about overall wellness and not just the aspects of mental health that cause shame, induce stigma, and keep our Black and Brown communities from accessing mental health services. While the program does have a curriculum for middle school and high school levels, the elementary school where I so happened to be placed did not. So we had to make moves. At SCTC, we are resourceful, we are flexible, and luckily for my co-intern and I, the innovation school counselor, shout out to Ms. Maynor, had the second step curriculum already for us to use. So for those of you who are unfamiliar with second step, it's a curriculum that was made for elementary through high school students, and it helps them it provides them with tools for academic and social success. Second step breaks down empathy, emotion management, problem solving, and skills for learning. And I know we all know that students need this. We all know adults who still need this. And so our job became utilizing second step to teach the tenets of Embrace the Mind. Embrace the Mind champions concepts such as mindfulness, compassion, coping with stress, resiliency, and allows for some psychoeducation, as Dr. Rossetti mentioned, about mental health diagnoses for our students to understand a bit more about what can cause mental health issues. We wanted our kids to know that you don't have to be crazy to be in therapy, and having a mental health diagnosis doesn't make you crazy. At my site, Innovation Elementary School, we had K through 5. So I would deliver the second step curriculum and relate it back to the Embrace the Mind tenets. And so one of my favorite concepts from second step was self-talk. It doubles as a coping skill as well as a learning skill, and it introduces kids to their inner thoughts and voices. Now, if you have any kindergartners or you know what it looks like going into any classroom under the age of 10 or 12, you know that kids do not have any concept of what an inner thought or voice is. And so we teach our scholars that self-talk means talking to yourself in a quiet voice or in your head. And self-talk tells them or helps them to focus, it helps them stay on task, and it also helps them to handle distractions. It's really ambitious for kindergartners, but you let them start early and they start practicing and they can develop this as they get older. And what I loved about this lesson was that it also taught our students to anticipate when they would need to use self-talk. So not just in classroom situations when teachers are teaching, but also on the playground when someone says a not so nice thing, and instead of hitting, we maybe think about it before we react. And this also can help at home. This can also help out in the community. And so to bring back in Embrace the Mind, I liken self-talk to mindfulness, because self-talk allows our scholars to center themselves and focus on themselves. And this is a really big and key component of mindfulness. It's also a really big idea to teach young ones who don't necessarily know what the self is or have a concept of what that would mean. So if they can practice this self-talk and mindfulness, centering themselves and finding their inner voice at as young as 5, imagine their thought process and the access that they would have to those thoughts as they get older and are old enough to know what a self is. As we did individual and group therapy with our students, we also continue to weave in tenets of ETM when it was appropriate. So we did deep breathing, journaling, yoga. A lot of my kids really loved yoga, expressing gratitude, and also practicing mindfulness in the Wellness Center. I'm going to turn it out now over to Mr. Kenneth who did a specific intervention and built a curriculum for the 3rd grade based on ETM.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. We, again, were assigned at various schools. And so the school site that I was assigned to was K-8, and we began with the elementary age students. So I was assigned to a 3rd grade class. And again, taking a look at the curriculum, ETM Embrace the Mind, there are 3 key components, which are self, stress, and society. So like my co-intern said, we were tasked with the ability of how do we take these concepts of mental health and introduce them to such a young population, to such a young group. Really, we're all socialized at an early age to understand what it means to be physically sick. You know, you have an 8-year-old, they fall, they scrape their knee, they know it's a boo-boo, we know we need to put some medicine on it. We're socialized at a young age to understand that I'm sick, my tummy hurts, I need medicine or chicken noodle soup. So how do we really emphasize the idea of an emotional scrape? What does it mean when your heart hurts? What does it mean when you have some type of invisible emotional underlying issue? So we started with Embrace the Mind. And again, the very 3 simple concepts of self. So I entered into the classroom and we already had what we called an activity already set, but we just started with very simple an introduction of emotional words. Self, we turned into me. And so we had the kids do a me collage. But before we get to the me collage, we want to introduce the word stress. And believe it or not, our scholars are intelligent, and they were coming up with amazing definitions of stress. They were coming up with how to deal with stress. We introduced the word coping, and my scholars were intelligent and bright, and they were right on point about these vocabularies, which was really, really amazing for us to sit back and have that interaction with our students. We also talked about society, but we switched society for community, and we brought it into our class community. So as we go into the me collage, I brought in magazine clippings, I brought in stickers with a lot of different descriptors and adjectives, and the kids were divided into pods. So we had about 4 students at each station, and they were tasked with putting together their me collage. What makes you you? What are you excited about? What are the type of things that you're interested in? And they were also tasked with trading with other members of their community within the classroom to find other pictures and stickers that they may not have been given initially. So what happened is, with this activity, created this organic opportunity to have the lesson come to life. And some of those same principles that we started off with at the beginning of the lesson, we start to see them come right before our very eyes. We had some students who had a little bit of stress because they wanted a particular sticker and they were out. There was a picture of strawberries or different types of things that they liked, and there weren't enough to go around. So that gave us an opportunity to talk about conflict resolution skills. That gave us an opportunity to talk about, well, how are you feeling? Why are you upset? And it really were real world examples of what was going on as it pertains to the ETM curriculum. Last but not least, as they put together their me collages, we allowed them to do a share out to the rest of their community. And remember, we're using the words again, really getting them acclimated to these new introductions of mental health words and components, all tying it back to the ETM curriculum. I think the biggest takeaway was allowing our scholars, our students, to see mental health as a real tangible thing, as much as we see physical health as a real tangible thing. And being able to equip them with emotional words, with feeling words, and to increase their vocabulary all around. I believe, and we know that that's going to serve them well in the future as they grow up to be amazing adults. I'll turn it back over
to Dr. Rossetti.
Dr. Rossetti.
Dr. Rossetti, hi. Okay, so one thing that I really liked about SCTC, like I said, is their ability to let you go out on your own and be a little creative. So this is a little rendition, a little nod to the old school. When Dr. Kennedy told me the title of this presentation, Making Lemonade When Auntie Rona Came to Town, this is what it resonated to me in this manner. So if you guys feel comfortable, close your eyes. I'm going to take you on a little transformative journey, how I saw things. Okay. So transport yourself to a family gathering. Let's say a backyard barbecue, family reunion style, where cousin JJ's mixing that old school jams in the background. The teenagers and the grandparents are having a dance off, making moves, deciding who's better, the twerk or the cha-cha. The little kids are squirting their water guns and playing tag. Then over the picnic tables, you got the uncles and aunties slapping bones and playing spades. Then you hear someone knock at the back gate. You rush in, and at that moment, you see Auntie Bebe and 7 of her unruly kids. And before you can back away from the gate, it flies open, the kids storm out, knocking down everything in their path. Then everyone sees them come in. The music stops. Everyone looks up at each other and turns and says, who invited them? And at that moment, Big Mama looks up, throws her hands up in the air. When life gives you lemons, make lemonade. Baby, y'all want something to drink? So this is what I saw when he said that. And that scenario to me felt kind of like what Auntie Rona, when she blew into town and presented us with our new normal. The funny thing is she didn't come alone. She brought several of our unsavory cousins like anxiety, anger, depression, irritability, insomnia, marginalization, post-traumatic stress, and hysteria. That's when Dr. BK, she stepped in and gave us an assignment that was to go out and help the community to navigate in the world that seemed like it was falling apart. And we all thought, that's going to take a lot of ingredients to make that lemonade taste pretty good. So the individuals you'll meet here today are just a microcosm of the clinician who seamlessly confronted all the challenges of our new normal. They familiarized themselves with telehealth, the virtual meetups and social media platforms. They coupled evidence-based practices and came up with creative, out-of-the-box thinking and engaged like a shift in the community. The residual effects of this global pandemic and the escalating racial injustices. We also had a counselor's corner so we could reach out to the parents. So when they were feeling like they had distressful moments or their parents were going through something, we had SCTC interns log into a site where the parents could come in and reunite and kind of get their sense of normalcy. So at this time, I'd like to introduce, we have some back feed here. I'd like to introduce the interns that changed lemons to lemonade with their unique ingredients, which framed hopeless to hopeful. Miss Dana, she added a cup of clinician self-awareness. Tell us more about that, Dana.
Thank you, Dr. Rossetti, for that word picture. Yeah, for me, self-awareness was a huge part of my experience. And it also is a huge part of how we approach mental health and how we look at our clients. I had to take a kind of a global and a societal picture and a societal view and then narrow it down. And when I thought about it that way, I thought about my stereotypes and the way that I look at people and my own personal biases. And I had to just really do some self-reflection. And as far as mental illness too, we have times where we bring our core beliefs and those irrational thoughts with us in situations, whether it's with a client or just how we look at the world, period. And I had to once again check myself, and in thinking about that, there's a conditional statement that comes to mind. If this happens, then this is going to happen. So, for instance, if kids listen to violent music or rap music, then that means that they're prone to violence. And that's not true. So we had to look at the way that we approach things sometimes and double check our rationale for why we think those things. And I had a little funny experience with one of the clients that I kind of made some assumptions and made some I have some assumptions about this student, and come to find out that was totally not who she was. And we built such a great rapport that once when I was doing an Embrace the Mind session, when the students were getting a little unruly, she stepped in and said, "Hey, wait a minute, she's talking, she's trying to teach you something, let her talk." And I thought that was such a cool moment. In another instance, there were some young men that, boys that I was teaching some tenets of Embrace the Mind, and they said, "Miss Dana, Black people don't do that. You're asking us to do things that Black people don't do." And I said, "Well, give me an example." And they told me, what they gave me an example of what I was, shared with them. And I said, "Well, let's talk about this." So it provided an opportunity for us to talk. And out of these experiences like that at the high school, I learned how to break down some of those things that I initially assumed, and then also bring it back to service, and bring it back to, I want to help you be aware, and I want the students to teach me how to be aware as well of culture and their experiences. And just to leave you with just a little brief thought that, with lemonade, sometimes people like their lemonade tart. Some people like it very sweet. Some people like their lemonade with fruit. So thank you.
Thank you, Miss Dana. Miss Andrea, she's going to talk about presence and creativity.
Thank you, Dr. Rossetti. So bringing it kind of forward now, Dr. Rossetti mentioned some things about what Rona brought. And so when Rona brought what she brought, it also mixed in with technology. And so it became real concerning for me to watch the parents and how distracted they could be, or the children and how distracted they were with the technology. So what I understood was how important it was to make sure the parents were able to be present as they interacted with their kids, which was very difficult because of all of what Rona had brought and prior to that. So being present means to me, and for many children, I'm sure, that Mom, I need your attention, and I need it to be undivided. So that's what today's child is basically asking for and not really able to get because of what Rona has brought. And so I took a look, because I've had the benefit of being able to work both at ISEF Middle School and at the domestic violence shelter. So I was able to incorporate creating a camp where they were able to do workshops. And so what was required participating in the workshops was the parent and the child, and it was a cell-free zone. So you weren't allowed to bring your cell phones, neither the kids, neither the parents, you could not. So I found it would be easier to navigate working with the children and being able to be more creative. So I created workshops that, and I'm going to talk about one specific workshop that we did. The workshops ran 2 to 3 hours long, so the parents had to be present there, because sometimes we were using tools that required supervision, like glue guns. And so one particular family I focused on was a parent that has 7 children. And during this process of watching her having to engage with 7 different personalities was really intriguing for me. No cell phone, imagine that. So the kind of things that I was looking for as I assessed and observed them interacting, the goal was to create a space that embraced individuality. They were working on communicating with each other. They were being creative as they built a bird feeder. They built rapport. I saw mindfulness. I saw teamwork, and it was a space that I was able to assess the family interaction. So also in that observation, I was able to see levels of frustration. I was able to watch how they processed that. I also watched how important it was they shared and they cared. I saw some disagreements, but through it all, they were able to resolve through communicating how they felt, their feelings. And at the end of the process, this is it right here. This is what the family built. The parent asked, how would you guys like to do this? Would you like to join this together? And the children was like, yes, I would like to join this together. So they joined this, and this is called the Bird Feeder's Mansion. It sits alongside our garden pots that we also had the opportunity to experience as we were working through our workshops. So I want to say thank you again, and I would like to express that in our breakout, we will be discussing about vicarious trauma and therapeutic gardening as we work through our situations or our working on mental health. Thank you so much, and I'll turn it back over to Dr. Rossetti.
Thank you, Miss Andrea. The next on our docket is Mr. Ken, and he's going to talk about reframing and masculinity.
So this has been an amazing experience so far, and thank you all for for having us be a part of this amazing conference. My experience at South Central Training Consortium has taught me a lot, but not only that, it's given us the opportunity to use Embrace the Mind as the vehicle by which we can go into the school setting and really be able to provide psychoeducation and be able to provide some introductory vocabulary and put some words to our feelings. So having been assigned to work at View Park K through 8, I was also assigned to work at the View Park High School. And it gave me a really good opportunity to continue to have the conversation about mental health. So my colleagues and I would do our presentations in the mornings to a classroom, and we had an opportunity to talk to a large group. And then when I had my one-on-one sessions, we were able to really zero in and go into some specific issues. So I would go in to meet with an individual, and what I began to see and what I began to understand is that my gender was playing a role. Unbeknownst to me, I was very much aware that representation matters. And so as an African-American male walking around campus, it even caused me to think about how many times did I have, a Black male teacher or a male teacher for that matter. And so all of this started to kind of organically just show up, whether it was within the elementary, middle school, or high school. Those were the things that were coming up, and it really caused me to think about masculinity. And we had some organic opportunities to even address toxic masculinity and come up with some definitions. So I'm meeting with the client, 16 years old, and the whole reason we're meeting, we want to talk about anger and some other things. And as we're talking, I was saying, so what do you do for fun? Who do you hang out with? Well, I go hang out with my friends, and like, okay, that's cool. And I said, well, you guys go to the movies? And he was like, oh no, guys we don't go to the movies. We can't go to the movies unless a girl's involved. I said, well, okay. I said, okay, wait a minute. What do you mean? He was like, no, guys, we just don't go to the movies to hang out. We only go if there's some other girls there. And I was like, well, what do you do? How do you guys hang out as young men? How do you guys, congregate? How do you guys relate to one another? And he's like, well, we'll play video games, or, we'll go play basketball. And again, my thing is not to shame an individual for their approach, but to really expand their definition of what does it mean to be male, right? What does it mean to be male? To be male is by birth, but to be a man is by choice. And we want to help them be able to expand on that, to elaborate on that, and put those definitions together. Because so many times in our society, we're getting mixed messages, whether it's from family members, friends, from the media, about what does it mean to be male? And what does it mean to be masculine? And I think we find ourselves in a Renaissance time where we are really reframing and we are redefining what masculinity is. And I thought this has been a tremendous opportunity just to be able to have those interjections, oftentimes some purposeful, and some that just start to happen organically. Understanding also that being from the community, that oftentimes you have to wear this mask of strength in order to maneuver and move through the community. So my goal was to provide a space where you can come in, and I want to give you permission to take your mask off so that you can be vulnerable, so that we can talk about some real issues, get to some underlying needs, and then at the opportunity presents itself towards the end of the session, I want to help you put your mask back on so that you can go back out there and be resilient and survive. And so it was understanding the differences, understanding the transitions. It's just really been a powerful opportunity to be able to see how all of this intersects, whether we're talking about just expanding one's definition and reframing, or just having the opportunity to see how that all shows up. We're talking about adolescents who are still trying to figure themselves out anyway. Everyone's trying to figure out their likes, their dislikes, and it's a powerful opportunity. As a young man, I almost try to say, the ghost of Christmas future coming to this young man and saying, hey, listen, I'm down the line, and I know some things are coming down the railroad track, and I just want to kind of give you some signposts to look at and put them in a therapeutic context so that they walk away with a better understanding of themselves. Because the ultimate goal is, I don't want you to be a carbon copy of me. I want you to be the best version of yourself. And I want you to be able to show up in the world authentically you, so that you can not just survive, but move to the world of thriving. Surviving is not enough. I want you not to survive, but I want you to thrive. I turn it back over to you.
Thank you, Ken. That was awesome. Now, last but not least, the final component of this masterful lemonade is Miss Urennaya.
Thank you, Dr. Rossetti. So my two ingredients for Auntie Rona's lemonade, as Dr. Rossetti put it, are multiculturalism and flexibility. School is a fast-paced and busy environment. Our kids, our teachers, our staff, and admin experience so much emotion and commotion throughout the day and even within minutes. One of the pearls of wisdom Dr. Brinkley Kennedy gave us during training, and we have now coined them BK-isms, was to look at the whole system, the entire system, as our client. So I had to learn to navigate the school system and adapt to the culture of a school environment. Mr. Ken talks about speaking our kids' language. And in order to navigate the school, we had to speak student, we had to speak teacher, we had to speak faculty, we had to speak admin, and we had to speak parent to bring all these systems together for the betterment of our kids. Some of our parents had concerns that seeing a therapist meant that something was wrong with their child. Teachers were concerned that therapy was taking away from their instruction time, and admin wanted to keep a structure that did not always work with therapy. Each system had goals, and how we wanted to get there was different. And most of the times it looked very different, but we all wanted the best for our kids. And so I did my part in working the system to make sure that when it came to the students, inside and outside of the classroom, we were doing our best to get them what they need. While ISF serves a majority of African-American students, we also have students and families who are monolingual Spanish speaking and also from other backgrounds. Mental health is not discussed in the same way in other countries and communities. I know this because with an immigrant background, I'm still trying to explain to my grandpa, like, what it is that I do. He still thinks that I deal with crazy people. And, at almost 80 years of age, that's probably the furthest that he will understand of psychology. But I understood that some of our parents would be hesitant to give consent for their kids to see me. And one of those reasons was because they didn't know me. And familiarity is so important in our communities of color. So what I would do is I would meet parents when they dropped off their kids to connect with them on a human level first and to gain their trust. Then I would understand what was important for them, for their student to learn. So this could be anything from respect in the home, being more confident, academic success, to being nice to their siblings, adjusting to new cultures and environments, identity, and also feelings that come up when family members are incarcerated. Then I would share with them about how therapy or counseling looks in the school, and more specifically, how I like to do therapy. And then also how therapy could help sow some of those seeds that they wanted to see in their children. When schools shut down, we switched to telehealth, and this groove that we had gotten of, picking up kids and the schedule, it was all thrown off. But I really believe that this idea of meeting the parents and introducing them to who I was and also meeting them where they were was very important to help us keep the groove. I mean, we were dancing to a different beat, but we were still dancing nonetheless. So this gave us an opportunity, and a rare opportunity at that, to see our kids and our other clients in their home environment. This gave us insight into their space and how they interacted in their homes. We all had to modify interventions to fit the space and the things available to us and our clients. We had to use the students' environments to continue treatment. Sometimes this meant incorporating a sibling that they needed to watch. Sometimes this also incorporated they're still hesitant or a bit maybe watchful parents. We also had to manage their emotions around COVID and the shelter-in-place order. Kids do not like being in one place for too long. And so talking to them about what it means to be in one place, to also the positive things and the benefit and the negative things that were associated with being at home with your family for so long. We also talked about the protests on top of the other things present in their environments and family systems that added to their entire family stress. Multiculturalism and flexibility allowed me to meet the whole system as well as join with it to provide them with the support that they would need, and unbeknownst to me, to get through Big Rona. I think it also helped bring a sense of familiarity to get through this difficult time that we are all sharing. I would like to take it back to Dr. Rossetti. Thank you.
Oh my gosh. Thank you, everyone. We've learned about the ingredients of self-awareness, presence, creativity, vulnerability, reframing, flexibility, diversity, and take all these ingredients, mix your lemonade, and don't forget to add it with some garnishes of compassion and empathy. Thank you guys for coming, and I'd like to turn it to Dr. Kennedy.
Thank you all. I'm just so proud of all of you. And I must say that we have a very resourceful, talented group of applicants to SCTC each year. And so one of our important goals is really to meet each of our trainees where they are, have them bring all of those skills, those life experiences they have to the table, so that you can really build upon that. Throw in a little bit of the academic training that you've had, and then cultural humility, which is a very important part of it. ISEF is especially important for us because it is one of the few schools, a group of schools, we have actually 6 schools, that continue to have a primarily African-American population. And our goal here is really to, again, help to introduce students to mental health concepts. The Embrace the Mind program was a wonderful addition to our toolbox that we were able to introduce students to, as well as Second Step. I would like to also mention that I see a couple of SCTC students who are in attendance here, and also graduates who are in attendance here. And I'm not going to embarrass you and call you out, but it is really an important resource for the community. I would like to actually ask the panel a question for them all to consider. It's up to you if you want to respond. But considering everything that you've been through, could you articulate some of the psychosocial barriers to educational growth that students face? And you can use cases if you want to share. But if you could identify a couple of the psychosocial barriers.
I'll go first,
Okay.
Dr. Kennedy.
Okay.
There was one case I remember, a large psychosocial barrier was just poverty. The student, she was 15, African American. She was in the foster care system. She saw her mom being murdered. and she was schizophrenic, her mother, and she committed suicide, burned herself up. Then she was thrown in, the student was thrown, we'll call her Star, was thrown into the foster care system where she was molested. Then they sent her to another school district, which was the ISIF, when I had the opportunity to meet with her when she wouldn't participate in school. So given all these barriers, and then on top of it, she's bipolar, so she's on medication, ADHD. And so they've diagnosed her with these gamut of things, but no one addressed the influences that her whole life situation had on her. So ability to focus and concentrate academically was so far gone that she was unable to be reached. So I worked with her for about 4 months before she was taken away, just like that. And I think those things, those issues that we can address, and just providing the mental health awareness component to schools are primal, because those issues help our students kind of adapt and adjust in their new circumstances and situations that they find just dealing with life.
Thank you. Did anyone else want to approach that in terms of barriers that you think that are standing in the way of educational success?
I do. So one of the things that I think I've learned over my experience working in schools and just being in school myself is that there are, of course, so many different things that lead to people not having access to curriculum. And I think a lot of times in classrooms, advocacy is a very big thing that keeps our students from being able to reach their goals. And that can be as big as teachers being able to advocate for them, but also students being able to appropriately advocate for themselves without being labeled as disrespectful or talking out. And especially with our younger students, I think I've seen a lot of our kids who would retaliate injustice that happened in the classroom, and then they would get in trouble for it. And so one of the things I really had to teach our kids was that there is a way for you to stand up to yourself, and there's a way for you to advocate your needs to your teacher. If this student is bugging you, let's think about this. Can we move to a different part of the classroom? What are some things that we can do so that you can advocate, but also keep yourself from getting in trouble? And then also on the back end, I would talk to teachers about how they can better serve our students. And so I think that advocacy, and also for our parents, a lot of our parents are unfamiliar with, how schools may operate and may be afraid to kind of step in and advocate for their students because they don't want retaliation. And so making sure that our faculty, that everybody in the school system is equipped to advocate for our families and our scholars, I think is very important to help them meet their goals.
Right, thank you. I have another question here. Was it important for you to provide service within the community in which you were raised? What was that impact like? How did you feel about it?
I'd like to talk to that one. So for me, looking at the differences, I grew up, when I was growing up in South Central Los Angeles, I had the benefit, and Kenneth talked about having a Black teacher. I had the benefit of having the majority of Black teachers early on that impacted my life. In fact, I would even say they were a part of the greater influence of me even becoming a part of educating. So for me, that in itself has been real big, being from the community.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. I would want to chime in here. My site is literally down the street from where I live. So having grown up in Los Angeles, I think it's so important. I think representation matters. I think it's understanding and having your finger on the pulse of the community in which you serve. It's just one less thing. It's an organic manifestation of what's already authentic about you. And so we can get right to the meat of the matter. We can start dealing with some underlying needs, because if I'm the client, I don't necessarily have to explain to you where I'm coming from, because you get it. There's this connection, there's the authenticity. And the examples that I use would be real classic examples that I know that the person on the other end of my voice is getting simply because we come from the same space. I think it's also important that the client sees someone from their community to increase their futuristic thinking. I want to give you an idea of what your future can look like because I came from the same place as you, and look at me showing up with all that I'm showing up with. And so that if I can do it, so can you. Your present situation is not your final destination, right? And I want you to understand that you are somewhere in the future and you look much better than you do right now. And here I am from the community showing up to let you know that that is fact. It is not fiction. You are from the community, of the community, doing things with the community, serving the community.
All right, thank you, Mr. Kenneth. Okay, I just want to see, we only have a minute or two. Any last comments that any of the panelists want to make?
Let me just say
Okay.
thank you, Dr. Kennedy.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you for giving
Well,
us the opportunity and the platform of
yes.
Embracing script and
Well,
bringing our knowledge and our presence to script and to the community beyond. So thank you.
Thank you.
I see Dr. Bashir is here, so we're going to actually move on, move on to the breakout room and turn it over to you.